Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Robin Bevan and this is the Mystic Table. In this video, I'm gonna talk about the Anima and also the authentic self, going first deeper into the Anima as the relating function and also as a symbol of the feminine aspects of the psyche. Especially relevant for the male psyche, and as such, not actually connected to women as some might think. But before going deeper into that, I want to very much highlight something regarding the new direction of the channel. Originally, it was known as the Moment Podcast before it transitioned into the Mystic Table. Part of the Mystic Table is still going to be the explorations in a more, personal manner of various topics, which is still the round table conversations that we're gonna have on the channel. But the personal explorations that have been going on, minus one about the Dashids, will be moved completely to Substack as Substack articles, and with that also the scripted elements regarding videos will be basically completed as well, where it will be me talking directly, authentically, like this. But yeah, so the first thing regarding the Anima that I want to talk about very much ties more into some misconceptions that certain people can have about it. As if, the Anima is an either woman or like something about like that it's like specifically tied to women in some sense, where in actuality it's not exactly so. It's more qualities that are generally associated with the feminine. But in a deeper sense, this ties very much to different qualities such as, emotions, creativity, emotional depth, intuition, and there's more aspects regarding that as well, regarding relating and sexuality and spirituality, and next to that, various different qualities that can come up as well. There being assertive quality side to the Anima as well, as much as a more nurturing side. So, there's a nurturing and withholding aspect to the Anima. There's a nurturing and withholding element to the Anima as well. Even though the withholding and assertive side of the Anima can be seen as pretty challenging by the ego, even though there's a purpose behind it as well. And there's a particular reaction that can come about due to this. A good example, which is a more personal example of mine, for instance, was that at some point before my relationship with my own Anima, that I named Christina, as I tend to name all the inner aspects for, differentiation purposes. She was kind of pissed for good reasons, kind of tied to the emotional suppression complex, which kind of was due to trauma, even though, fine, not my fault, but I did keep that pattern up, and yeah, there's kind of other parts of that as well regarding like vulnerability and other aspects that I was actively kind of avoiding in that sense as well, and certain parts that were neglected. And with that, there was some inner conflict going on there between me as ego and the anima. They're not something in hindsight bad, just challenging and something to slowly work on. Because underneath that kind of initial conflict, perception really was a sense of woundedness that was underlying this, which is actually what was going on. So for me, there was a lot of compassion needed and understanding and love as well towards this aspect of myself to really nurture that relationship and actually build trust in that sense with that particular aspect of myself. It's kind of the same thing with the inner child as well, the different inner child aspects, some of which were kind of mistrusting. And it took me a long time to build the trust and the kind of like, well, allow that part of myself to be more present. And regarding the anima, for me, it was also very much changing my relationship to both, well, kind of intuition, but also very much emotions, which is also connected with me, well, with working through the emotional suppression complex and the underlying emotions of that, but also really changing the general relationship with emotions at large for myself. Kind of like how one, relates to one's own emotions, which also helped with the relationship with my anima, which at the same time also relates to how one is relating to various aspects of the psyche as well, because that also relates to different aspects of the shadow and really, in a larger sense, different aspects of the self. Because one important aspect of this type of inner work, this Jungian depth psychology work, when it comes to aspects, is also tied very much to perception, because the ego generally has a particular perception about a particular aspect, which might actually not be as accurate as the ego thinks it is, because things can be kind of deceiving. And that's very much one very key aspect. So something that can appear, with, for instance, my anima, appear very challenging and very like, well, withholding and trying to be a bit more possessive and very much leading more to some emotional instability and irritability and also insecurity. Well, yeah, those were aspects that were present, but then through the process of like shifting these perceptions, the relationship started to evolve and change with this other aspects, so the anima, and thus started to improve, and with that, the psychological and deeper emotional side of it started to improve as well. But this is a process that requires one to cultivate, a deeper relationship with the anima, which takes time. It is not something that can be rushed or controlled or otherwise anything done about. There's a lot of shadow work that might be necessary for some people as well, how it was, for instance, necessary for me. To work through certain psychological complexes that might actually be a barrier towards interacting with the anima, and having to maybe address the wounds connected to the anima, which is actually something that can be quite prevalent with men. Actually, can be. Well, it doesn't technically have to be, but if there's trauma involved, definitely. And the very process of all of this is to very much work through this. There's the cognitive aspect to it regarding working through the different aspects. And with it is, the psychological complexes and the behaviors that creates, and all these unconscious dynamics that we're then bringing into consciousness. But a very important part of this also is connected to emotions, and with that affect. Because the thing is that by working with emotions, we actually can transform what is going on. It's not something we can cognitively do. It's a process that happens, and through working with the different emotions. For instance, recently I had my anima bring up particular emotions linked to grief and sadness and other such emotions. And I had to work through these, to work through the particular complex that was also tied to this pattern I was working through, which for me tied to an unhealthy pattern of seeking out distorted Apollo archetype kind of figures within my life, which wasn't actually helpful. It was actually unhealthy, and an unhealthy pattern for my anima, which, even though there was an unconscious gravitating towards that, these underlying emotions need to be worked through. And I did that through actually leaning into these emotions, and actually through that allowing this to be processed. And through this processing, then the compensatory impulse from the unconscious could actually start to arise and actually update consciousness, which is an important factor, when it comes to healing. Because the thing is that even though a lot of these emotions can be seen as very unpleasant, they're very much part of the healing process. And also tied to the body as well, because there's the cognitive side to it, the emotional side, but also the somatic side, and these are all interconnected. And by working with all of these different aspects, one can work in a more holistic manner, and also address different facets of the self in that way. And really, in the end, when it comes to that, working through these different complexes and different shadow material, and also with working with the anima and the different emotions that might come up and other unconscious content, really what we're doing with that is to clear the river of the self. You could really see it as different stones or logs or other debris being within the river of the self, and these are blocking the flow of the self towards the grander ocean, which connects all individuals together. That's the collective unconscious, and with that also, kind of symbolically, also the self, the unfolding of the self. And the thing is that, yeah, these things block it. And the entire process of individuation is to lift all that debris out and to let the river of the self, which is unique to each individual, to unfold. And that's also kind of where, when we work through different aspects, different psychological complexes, and work on that, and work with our own dreams, which has its own language and symbolism, as much as working with our inner world and the anima, and various such aspects. Though there are universal aspects to it, there's a lot of nuances and different conflicts that can be at play with different individuals, and different individuals also have different states of readiness to work with certain unconscious content. So even though, if one works through certain things, and it's something I know from experience, you might start to notice the stuff you've worked through in other people, and you kind of notice like, oh, I can see this. This might actually be this particular thing that they might be dealing with. And I might add might, because you don't necessarily really know. And that's at the same time also the important thing, because you don't exactly really know. But also the thing is that you kind of should let that unfold on its own, because when they're ready, they will be dealing with it, or seeking out information about it, or otherwise trying to resolve it. You can't really rush that process, because not everyone is ready for certain things. Kind of the same thing why I changed the podcast from what it was to what it is, because certain things, even in a cultural context, are best left unsaid. Because, well, certain things people just are not ready for. And it's not really. Yeah. They'll get to it when they do. You kind of have to trust in the process of it. You can, guide them towards it and focus on the process, which is good enough. And not try to hand them the entire tree, like, here you go, here's the tree. It's like, no, we start with the seed, then we water it, and then the tree will start to grow and actually get there, and the understanding will unfold. And that's also kind of one thing to understand with the unconscious as well. It's one big unfolding. And that unfolding happens within the individual in its own pace, as much as it happens within the world in its own pace as well. Where the unconscious, and really with that the self, is trying to work towards the resolution of various inner conflicts. And it's kind of why it's bringing up various conflicts. It's kind of part of it. And the ego can then interact with it and try to resolve it, and work with the unconscious and the self and, well, the anima, to actually facilitate that. But at the same time, the collective unconscious is also working towards that as well, even though on some level one can be like, well, it's the trickster, the shadow, the collective shadow is at play. Yes, that's true, but at the same time, there's a deeper layer to it, where all these different aspects and conflicts are really trying to work towards a resolution of what's happening. Even though these resolutions and all these things can only come about by conscious engagement, and that can only really happen on an individual level. So that's kind of that. Regarding these things, a lot of these more collective unconscious aspects also tie to societal complexes, which also are within individuals as well, as much as personal complexes tied to particular traumas. And these are, like I said, kind of like the rocks in the river that we're trying to get out of. They can create these particular patterns and distortions, but at the same time, it's the case that all these different archetypes and archetypal currents within the collective unconscious exists in a certain manner, as much as all the various aspects of the individual also exist in a particular manner, and this particular manner actually is the undistorted manner of how it actually is. A lot of the things that are going on are based on perceptions, and also at the same time, the psychological complexes as well. But there's an underlying unity and undistorted kind of sense present there as well. It kind of already exists, even though it exists in potential, but it's kind of already there. It's just a question of realizing that the underlying actual unity that's actually there. But that's kind of just a process of working through that. And by working through that, one is at the same time working towards the self. And with that, the authentic self, the true self, so the self that we really are, which already exists within the individual and is thus also already visible in the individual as well. Because these qualities already exist, or have the potential to be, unfolded and realized. And you can already see these qualities within the individual, and you can notice them, especially if you've worked through a lot of psychological complexes, projections, and other unconscious material already. Then you can start to see the world more clear, and you can start to notice like how certain people already have certain qualities, that they're just unaware that they have them. It can be like positive qualities, for instance, like, I don't know, kindness, or other different aspects of themselves that they're not acknowledging. It's kind of in their shadow. They're kind of unconscious of the fact that, for instance, they are already kind, and they're not realizing that, not seeing it, or don't want to acknowledge it because of some reason. There's some inner conflict about it, for instance. But all these things already exist and are already there. But yes, when it comes to this entire process, though, it's really about realizing that what already is, because it's not really about cultivating something or trying to create something or work towards something. It's more of an uncovering what is already there. It's kind of like the taking away of things, than really trying to take things and put them together kind of approach. And when it comes, to this entire process, genuine interactions are very much also key with this as well. Because genuine interactions gives the person the opportunity to, work through various aspects, tied to, for instance, shadow aspects to the inner child, or particular aspects connected to the anima as well. This is especially true if one does this in a conscious manner, where one becomes aware of the potential projections and all kinds of other aspects that could be at play, and any inner conflict that might come up. And very much key in this is emotional processing. which allows for the breakdown of the psychological complex and these different inner dynamics that can be at play. I do have to say it's not a pleasant process, but one that is necessary to get to the self, and with that the authentic self, who one really is. The reason why genuine interactions are so key is because through these kind of interactions, one creates the conditions for proper corrective experiences as well, how one would call them in therapy. Because staying in a particular pattern or otherwise still operating from a more unconscious manner where there's kind of like desires and all kinds of other things coming in can distort the efforts towards healing, even though those will be at play first, and one can become slowly aware of that through analyzing one's own behavior, the emotional responses, and various aspects of the relating that one does. And the relating also ties into the anima and the relating patterns that one has. And by becoming aware of that and working through that, you can work towards more and more genuine interactions, which also then starts to touch upon deeper and deeper layers of the psyche as well, bringing up, for instance, deeper emotional material as well, which is something I've been recently working on myself. And in my case, it touched upon, for instance, both the anima, but also what is called the victim child and the scapegoat complex, which I wrote about in a Substack article as well, if you want to know more about it. But the key aspect of that really boiled down to the fact that these genuine interactions then allow for the healing experience, for these underlying emotions to start to come up, because the complex has a duality, and if you can actually get to the underlying emotions through something that resolves this split, this duality, through a synthesis, you can actually then start to resolve it and touch directly on the emotions. And a key aspect of this also is to lean into the emotions and also the phrases or any material that comes up, like any images or any other aspect, and you can lean into that and kind of be like, okay, well, for instance, for me, one thing that came up was tied to people being genuinely kind. And that was exactly what I was leaning into. It's like the realization, people can be genuinely kind, which contrasted with the belief that was there tied to a particular psychological complex. And by tapping into that counter belief, so kind of a counter complex of sort, and by reinforcing that and working through the underlying emotions, one can then start to resolve the particular belief. Well, that's one way how to do it anyways. And by doing such things, one can start to work towards a deeper connection to the self as well, because it's clearing the channel towards the self. But the anima is also very much key in that as well, as the bridge and the mediator between consciousness and the unconscious, and also tied to the way we relate to others and relate to ourselves. And there are important aspects regarding that as well, with that, regarding the approach of working with the anima. It can't be one of control or trying to, force certain things It's more one of building a relationship, one of collaboration and trying to work together with the anima. So she can bring up in dreams and generally various aspects and content of the unconscious, and you can be like, okay, well, I know this from these aspects of the dream language that I have and what I've started to figure out over time. Then you can be like, okay, well, this means this, and these are like these emotions tied to these aspects. So then I can lean into that and do these actions to start to work with that and heal this. And you can start to slowly do that. And sometimes this also connects to working with particular archetypes as well, like Dionysus or, well, the sovereignty goddess, for me, for instance, but it can also be different archetypes as well. But also, when it comes to the Anima, there are also different facets to the Anima next to relating. There's the relating to oneself, but also the relating to others, which is also where genuine interactions come in. But also, there are other aspects as well. The more assertive sexual fears, nurturing, and various other aspects like that. And a lot of this, tied to the anima, and these qualities are, qualities that she possesses, but also kind of qualities that one can integrate as well in a part of oneself, which also very much is key. And through building the deeper relationship with the anima, what also can then start to happen slowly is that one has a better relationship with one's own emotions, and not seek them as good or bad, just seek them as what they are. Next to also, through this, touching deeper into more creative aspects and spiritual aspects of the self as well, where there's an increased sense of creativity that can arise with this as well, in a creative writing sense, for instance, or poetry, and different aspects like that. It's kind of like by being in touch with one's emotions and the unconscious, this starts to really clear these channels where, writer's blocks and all kinds of other stuff starts to kind of like go away, because you're kind of clearing out all these different inner conflicts and various complexes. Key in this also, though, is that you work with the anima and the unconscious and let things kind of naturally unfold. It's kind of part of the self and the authentic self as well. It's a natural unfolding of that what is there, how all of these things manifest. Which is also one thing that is key, regarding anima work as well. And I've kind of said that already earlier regarding, the relating part of it. Because, yes, there's for sure a need to really internalize various aspects of the anima, which is key. But not all aspects can be resolved internally. For instance, like the actual relating part, like relating with other people, can't be resolved internally. Even though you can work on other aspects, certain emotions, or do self-compassion or self-love and various other things like that. But there are certain things that can't be resolved in any internal manner, but requires an external interaction to touch upon the deeper layers that can't be touched upon in any other particular manner. Because that's also very key to understand, when working with the anima as well. It's not a cognitive thing, really. It's a very emotional thing. And with that, you're interacting really with one's emotional self. And you can cognitively, understand a whole bunch of things, but it doesn't really necessarily change the fact that the emotional self will react in a particular manner. And it's actually through corrective experiences, or in particular instances, more like exposure therapy can work too. But it's through these kind of things that the kind of inner emotional patterns can start to actually change. Like a longer while ago, I think that's almost like a year ago, or almost a year ago, where my anima in dreams started to appear in a state of distress. It's kind of like signaling the underlying emotions that I were actually not addressing, which was trying to be brought up, at least brought up in dreams. It's kind of the precursor of if you actually try to work on it, where then the actual tight affect and the emotions can then start to come up. And I can just say that it's not an easy process. Because I can say that once one starts to work through different, aspects of the shadow, and especially the collective shadow, that's quite one to work through. Well, certain individuals that you will encounter in real life are definitely going to shadow project heavily on that, especially once you're, trying to integrate a particular aspect that the culture, for instance, finds very challenging. And you try to embody these aspects, especially kind of Dionysus. For instance, well, different aspects of the feminine too, but the important thing to remember about this is that you're dealing with projections by others, and you shouldn't take these personal. Same with someone coming with like some form of like, I don't know, personal insecurity about something, or a particular fear, or a particular something. It's like, yes, that's their unconscious content. It's nice. It's like one can talk or work through these things with said individual or person if it's possible. If not, well then you have to set your assertive boundary about it to protect oneself. But other than that, it's kind of that you shouldn't internalize these and take it from a former scapegoat. Trust me, do not. That's the same with the whole culture war stuff too. Do not internalize these things. It only just leads to more of a psychological burden for oneself to really be internalizing these different aspects in that manner. These different projections. One can learn from it, definitely, and kind of consciously engage with it if it occurs. But internalizing them, no, should not. But I guess it requires a certain level of, awareness about it, and the awareness of, the process of it. And that kind of takes time. But with a deepening awareness of these dynamics and kind of these different things connected to oneself that one, might be working with, it over time becomes easier to see these projections for what they are and be like, okay, I'm dealing with this particular distortion or projection or something about, for instance, Dionysus. It's like one that I've had in the past. As much as with the unconscious and the anima, the relationship that one builds with the anima, for instance, is key. And that kind of relationship is one that has to be one of respect towards the unconscious and respect towards the self, and with that also towards the anima. Because all these different aspects of the unconscious have their own autonomy, their own agenda of sorts. There is an inherent wisdom and inner logic in it that can be very difficult sometimes for the ego to understand, but it still is there. And, driving certain things for a particular reason or pointing certain things out. Same the past month, for instance, with particular emotions I've been processing, I would on purpose lean into these particular emotions and the phrases that would come up and the imagery that would come up, and just lean into it. Accept it as it is. It's like, yes, there's grief coming up, or, well, anger coming up. I've had that too. Or even rage. Different emotions are coming up, and some of them might seem like, well, they're not pleasant emotions, you could say, but they're emotions. They're there for a reason. There's a particular, like, for instance, with crying, for instance, well, there's particular grief coming up about a particular situation. Well, they're valid. They're there. And then once you've processed through it, well, you've processed through it. Congratulations, you've been processing and healing, because that's actually what it is. And that's a thing about healing, and it's a kind of a thing about, a lot of this work as well can be kind of challenging. It's kind of like dipping a cloth in alcohol and then putting it on a wound to sterilize it and to make it clean so that all the dirt is out, and then that it can properly heal. And yes, it's going to hurt. And yes, it's not going to be pleasant, but it's part of the healing journey. And with that, it's also part of the movement towards the self as well.